Welcome to this overview of Couchbase Capella, DBaaS free tier for developers. In this video, I'm going to cover a quick tour of the Capella UI, how to connect your applications to Capella, how to upload data into a Capella database. We'll look at some of the advanced search features that are included in the free tier. We'll highlight mobile and edge capabilities with Couchbase App Services. And we'll talk about some of the benefits you'll get when you move to a paid tier. So let's get started. I'll start by logging in with an account I've already created. I've used a regular email address for my account, but you can also create accounts with GitHub or Google credentials, or you can log in with an SSO if your organization supports that. We start here on the Operational tab. In this case, operational just means the database that you'd normally be connecting your application to for day-to-day work, as opposed to an analytics database that would be used for BI, reporting, and connecting other data sources in your enterprise. Our first step is to create a cluster. And for the free tier, you get one free cluster. Now, each cluster needs to belong to a project, which can be very helpful in large enterprises to organize clusters and services. But we'll just go with my first project. The first thing we do here is select the cluster type. So a free cluster is a single node that runs in a shared environment. And there's a single node paid option. That's a low cost option that unlocks more features. And there are other options for more complex deployments, custom and multi-node. We won't be covering those today. You can enter a cluster name and description. You can choose which cloud service provider you'd like. Now, free tier regions are limited, but paid tier has many more region options. And finally, node and services. This is where you'd normally specify which services you want and how many nodes. With free tier, you're limited to a single node with these 4 services. But good news, these are the most popular services and enable a ton of great Couchbase features. If you'd like to check out the full configuration options that a paid account would unlock, you can click See All Cluster Options here. Now it's going to take a minute or two for the cluster to be deployed, so we're going to skip ahead in time a little bit. Now that the cluster is ready, let's explore how to navigate it. So we'll click on the cluster name here, and we'll see a quick start screen that leads to a tutorial playground, how to try app services, documentation, and support. So in support, as a free tier user, you don't get any sort of support SLA, but you can still ask questions in the Couchbase forums and Discord, as well as provide feedback via this feedback form here. So let's go back to the Data Tools tab. The free cluster automatically comes with a sample bucket of data called Travel Sample. And this contains travel-related data like airports and hotels. A bucket contains one or more scopes, which contain one or more collections, which themselves contain documents, the actual data. On the screen here, we see some documents from the airline collection, which is in the inventory scope, which is in the travel sample bucket. We can click on a document key to get a JSON view of individual documents. In application code, looking up documents by their keys is the fastest way to interact with data. And one of the reasons for this speed is that Couchbase has a built-in managed cache. So the most recently accessed or created data is stored and accessed via memory first, and it's also stored on disk asynchronously. As a developer, you don't have to manage this cache. It's just part of how Couchbase operates. So use key value when you can, but when interacting with data, you don't always know those keys. So that's why Couchbase also provides a full SQL++ query language, which includes all the SQL syntax you're already familiar with, plus more functionality to work with JSON. So here's an example query that uses a join and a group by and a sum for aggregation. So we'll execute this query to get some results. Now, key value and SQL++ are the most simple and straightforward ways to work with data in Capella. Capella also has a built-in AI chat called Capella IQ. And this tool can help you write and understand queries, create sample data, generate code, indexes, and more. Let's take a quick look at the Monitoring tab. This contains cluster overview insights, as well as service level insights for data, query, index, and nodes, with Metrics Explorer to allow you to construct your own deep dives. There's also a Health Advisor tool here for paid users. This is a tool that gives you advice on how to configure your Couchbase clusters to keep them in good health, and it can send you emails with recommendations as well. And one more aspect of monitoring is alerts. So I'll click on my profile here, and I'll scroll down to email notifications. And if this is checked, I'll get notified when any resource in my projects has a critical or warning level event. Now let's look at how to connect your application to the data in Couchbase. So let's click on the Connect tab here, and we'll start with SDKs. And here we see a connection string. This is what you're going to give to a Couchbase SDK to connect. You'll also need to allow one or more IP addresses, as Capella by default will block any connection attempts from IP addresses not allowed. So we'll click Allowed IP Addresses and we'll add Allowed IP. You can add whatever IP address you want. You can allow access from anywhere on a permanent or temporary basis. You'll also need to create access control cluster credentials. This consists of a cluster access name, a password, and access levels. So I'll put in a SVC demo here, and I'll put in a strong password, and we can change read and write access at bucket, scope, collection levels. We can give read access, write access, or read and write at any of those different combinations there. Okay, now back to the quick start. We can select a code sample. For instance, we can select .NET here. And this is going to give you a snippet to connect or a full code sample with operations that you can copy paste into your IDE to get started. And as you select the credentials and you select the bucket scope collection, it will populate the code with those tokens. There are many developer integrations and frameworks that you can also use. Check out the developer integrations page here on Couchbase.com to see if your favorite is listed. Okay, let's look at how to import some data into Capella. So let's go back here to Data Tools and then the Import tab here. Now you can import CSV, JSON, other formats right here in the browser. You can also generate a CB import CLI command if you want to download the command line tools and use those. And finally, you can import other sample built-in data sets, like travel sample. So let's import some JSON data that I have on my computer. And I want to put this into a new collection, so I'll click Create New Target Collection first. And I've got a file here called userprofiles.json. And once I upload that, you can see that I can choose how Capella will create the ID keys for each document. You can base it on a field or generate one or what have you. It's going to give me a preview of the data that's going to be imported. And I can make changes to the import rules here if I want to do that. Click Import to get started. And then once that's done, we'll click Documents and we'll see the new collection here with the new imported data. And I'll go ahead and go back to Query here and we'll query this data with SQL++ as well. So we'll select from User Profiles. We can also insert data right here from the UI. So click Create Documents and put in whatever ID and JSON you'd like. You can also insert data from the SDK. So over here in Visual Studio Code, this is the code that I grabbed from the quick start. So I'll just execute .NET Run. It successfully creates Couchbase Airlines. Let's go back to the UI to see this, and we'll filter by key, Airline 8091. And there it is. And let's go ahead and delete that document here. Now, if you use Visual Studio Code or a JetBrains IDE, there are official Couchbase plugins available that help you do a lot of the data management operations right from your IDE. One more method worth mentioning is the Data API to work with Couchbase data via HTTP requests. So we'll click on Data API here, and you need to enable this the first time. So we'll go ahead and do that, and we'll fast forward to when that's done. Now check out the full documentation for all the endpoints, but we'll see one example here, just a simple curl request back over here in Visual Studio Code Terminal to go ahead and get one of those airlines again with a HTTP request. Let's go back over to Capella here. Now before we get to mobile, let's talk about search and vector search, which by the way are also available in mobile. So let's start with a vector search index, as vectors are a key component of AI models, including use cases like RAG and agentic apps. First, let's bring in a sample data set that includes some vectors. So over in Data Tools Import, we'll bring in the color vector sample. Now the data in this data set has two vectors in each document. One is a very small vector for color code, and then there's a vector for text embedding of the color description. You can see in this sample right here. Now, if we want to perform vector search on this data, Couchbase actually has 3 different options for your vector search needs. Hyperscale vector index. This is the fastest performance, especially for very large data sets. There's also the composite vector index. This is great for pre-filtering use cases where you can narrow down the data set with non-vector criteria first. And finally, search vector index. This is great for smaller data set vector queries that can be unified with text and geographic constraints. Now these options help you to optimize your needs to the most efficient method for your use case. Let's create a hyperscale vector index. We'll give it a name here, and we're going to choose the data, which is color vector sample and the color scope and the RGB collection. And what we're going to be searching is the embedding vector dot. So this is a text description of the color. Now there's lots of index configuration options here. I'm not going to go over all of them, but these allow you to trade off between speed and accuracy in your search. We'll go ahead and create that. Now note that you can create these without the UI wizard by using the create vector index syntax in SQL++. Now this data set already has an index like this created, so I'm not going to create it again. But to use this index, we're going to go back to the query workbench, and we're going to use the approx vector distance function in a SQL query. So for instance, this query here, this finds the text embedding for the color sky blue. So that's great. We can use that to get that embedding there, that array. And then we're going to plug it into a CTE and then another SQL query so that we can find the closest 3 colors that are semantically similar in their text descriptions. The closest match is going to be itself, of course. So execute this query and we'll see those results. Another option is to create a search index, which allows you to search for similar text and provides a ranking of the results, much like a search engine. So let's click the search tab here, then create search index. We'll give it a name. And the data we're going to look at this time is in the travel sample. So we're going to look at the hotel, and each hotel has a description field. So let's click on that. The type of this is a text. We're searching by text in this particular index. And we want to include that in the search results so we can actually see the data, not just the document key. You may or may not want to do that in production. There's lots of other text search options here, lots of other things to tweak. You can add multiple fields to the index. And replication and partitions can be important, especially when you get into that paid tier, when you have multiple nodes in a cluster. And we'll go ahead and create the index. This index may take a while depending on how much data you actually have. But we'll go ahead and click on search to try it out. We can put in a search term like garden, or we can create more complex search strings. There's a whole syntax to it. And we'll click on the ID of the results to see the full document. And you can see that in this case, the word garden is here. And in the second one, the word garden is also there. So clearly these are matching that term. And it's constructing a score based on which is the most relevant. Now you can actually construct more complex searches. So things like unions with the Couchbase SDK in your application. But I'm not going to go into all that detail today. Okay, now let's look at mobile a little bit. Let's go back to the Home tab here, and we're going to explore App Services, which is a backend as a service for mobile, IoT, and edge applications. And we'll go through the guided setup. We've already got a cluster with some sample data, so let's create the app service now. You can specify the service name, endpoint, and credentials, and we'll give it SVC mobile, and then a secure password here. It's going to take a minute or two for that app service to be deployed, so we're going to skip ahead. Once the app service is loaded, we can test it out by connecting to it via a REST API. Now I'll enter the app username and password, select a collection. It's going to suggest a key, and then we'll go ahead and run this GET request. And it returns the results. A more powerful use of app services is to connect to it from Couchbase Lite. Now Couchbase Lite is a database that runs locally on your mobile and edge devices. And this connection shows you how to do that step by step. You can select a programming language to see some code samples and how to connect your client to app services. There are a few Couchbase demo apps you can check out as well. So this is a video of a live sync demo. It's a very simple and visual way to see app services and peer-to-peer and synchronization in action. So it can sync between devices, between data centers, and through the internet or through some sort of local connection. You can get the code for this on GitHub if you want to build it yourself or look at the code. And you can also download the app already built and deployed to the Apple App Store, so you can run it yourself as well. There are more capabilities of Couchbase that I won't be showing a demo of, so this is just a few of them. Geospatial is part of search. This allows you to search documents by radius, box, or polygon of latitude and longitude areas. SQL++ also has time series functions for specially formatted JSON time series data. Graph traversals can be accomplished with recursive CTE, or common table expression, and a hybrid search. You can combine vector search with search and SQL and graph and time series. You could filter a catalog of products by description, similar picture, location, price range, amount of inventory, etc. Capella free tier gives you a lot of features to get started with. When you're ready to upgrade, however, a paid tier includes Larger cluster sizes for increased performance, more data, higher throughput. Multi-region replication. You can replicate data between multiple data centers. Real-time analytics. You can pull in data from your operational Couchbase data along with blob storage, S3, Parquet, and other databases via Kafka to run BI and ad hoc queries for reporting, including write back to operational data. There are some enhanced security features, so more control and options over security, single sign-on, audit control, etc. Advanced monitoring and alerts. So I mentioned the health advisor earlier. That's included in the paid level to give you advice on how to make sure your cluster stays healthy. And there's other features as well, like the fleet manager. And finally, you get SLA-backed service, of course. So you submit questions and problems to our support team to get help, answers, and fixes. Now, one more note on free tier. As long as you use it, it remains free. However, if you stop using it, it will be paused after a certain period of inactivity. After an extended period, it will be deleted. Of course, at that point, you can always create another free tier cluster. If you'd like to try Capella for yourself, sign up for the free trial today. You'll get access immediately and guidance from our helpful UI to get started. You'll get developer-ready code snippets, connections, and data upload options. You'll get mobile and edge app services for automatic syncing and backend, along with advanced search and query options for vector, text, SQL, and more. You'll get options to upgrade to paid tiers as you need, including single node, multi-node configurations, and full customization, as well as many more cloud service provider regions. Thank you for watching.